the endless twilight of the Siberian Arctic winter draped over the land like a thick fur blanket. In the pale blue glow that passed for daytime, the Evenki people moved through their routines with the slow, deliberate pace of creatures who knew the sun wouldn't return for 60 more sleeps. Inside the chum, the traditional dwelling of lashed poles and layered reindeer hides, the air smelled of smoked meat, dried berries, and the faint iron scent of blood from recently prepared game. By the central fire pit, an elder woman named Olga worked a piece of mammoth tusk with tools passed down from her grandmother's grandmother. Her hands, though wrinkled and spotted with age, moved with unerring precision as she first scored the ivory with a chisel made from a wolf's leg bone, then rubbed the grooves with a stone, smoother dipped in seal oil, finally polished the surface with strips of dried reindeer tongue. The emerging shape, a crescent moon sled, would become part of tomorrow's storytelling ritual. Nearby, her granddaughter practiced the same motions on a scrap of antler, her small fingers learning the pressure needed to carve without cracking the precious material. Outside, the men returned from their trap lines, their fur-lined boots crunching through the snow's icy crust. They carried 3 snowshoe hares, their fur turned winter white, a string of ptarmigan birds, frozen solid mid-flight, the prized catch, an Arctic fox whose pelt shone like fresh milk. As they entered through the double-flap entrance designed to trap cold air, the women took game and began immediate processing. Using ulas, the half-moon knives that never needed sharpening in the cold, they skinned the fox in one continuous piece, removed the sinews for thread making, set aside the bladder for water storage, reserved the bones for future tools. The children watched this ritual with sleepy eyes, having spent the dim daylight hours, gathering armfuls of dwarf willow branches for fuel, checking the ice-preserved stores of summer berries, practicing their carving skills on scrap ivory. As the temperature dropped to minus 50 degrees Celsius outside, the family gathered around the fire. The eldest male, his face mapped with scars from frostbite, stirred a pot of thick stew containing dried reindeer meat, preserved cloudberries, a precious handful of pine nuts traded from southern tribes. The steam rose in lazy spirals that seemed to merge with the smoke hole's escaping tendrils. This was the time for stories, not told, but unwound slowly like a carefully coiled rope. Tonight's tale would explain why the moon, now glowing brightly through the smoke hole, wasn't round like the sun. But that story would wait until the stew was finished, until the last sewing needle had been put away, until even the dogs outside had settled into their snow nests. The storytelling began as all Evenki tales do, with hands. Ulaga, the elder, laid 9 carved ivory pieces in the firelight, a crescent, a disc, a fox, a hare, and 5 jagged shards. She rubbed bear fat between her palms to warm them before touching the first piece. Before moons had phases. Her voice rasped like snow underfoot. The night chariot was whole. Her granddaughter prepared the storytelling tools, a sealskin drum filled with frozen pebbles, a birch bark strip painted with rendered fat, a bundle of Arctic cotton to demonstrate the falling snow. Outside, the real Arctic foxes yipped in the darkness as the story unfolded. Long ago, when animals spoke as people do, the moon was not a pale disk, but a great chariot of blue ice pulled by silver reindeer. Each night it raced across the sky, its runners hissing against the stars. The chariot's light was trapped inside perfect ice, clear as glacier water, hard as mammoth bone. The clever Arctic fox, here Ulliger held up the ivory carving, had been promised the warmest spot by the fire if he could deliver a message to the moon spirits. But when he reached the chariot, drum trembles as the granddaughter makes the pebbles rattle like cracking ice. He found the reins woven from northern lights, the runners polished by comet dust, the seat hollowed from a single ice block, and being a fox, he could not resist testing it. Birchbark bent sharply with a dry snap. The first crack appeared when his claws scraped the left runner, the second when his bushy tail knocked the spirit lamp. By the time the silver reindeer bolted, the chariot was breaking apart, slowly at first, then all at once. Cotton fluff drifts down like falling ice shards. The largest piece remained as our moon. The 5 sharp fragments became the morning star, the evening star, the north star, the wanderers, the lost piece, still searched for in winter storms. And the fox? His white winter coat was singed orange by escaping chariot fire, which is why Arctic fox kits are born dark to this day. The children's mittens made soft shushing sounds as they rubbed sleep from their eyes. Outside the chum, an unnatural green glow pulsed along the horizon, the perfect moment to continue the story. Ulliger lifted a dried reindeer bladder filled with water, letting the firelight refract through its curves. When the chariot shattered, she began, suspending the bladder by its sinew cords. Its light didn't vanish. It bled across the sky. Her assistant, the granddaughter who'd stayed awake, prepared the demonstration materials. A ptarmigan wing fan to stir the air magnetite sand from the riverbank seal oil in a shallow stone dish, rabbit fur from yesterday's catch. The process recreated the ancient celestial accident with earthly elements. Step 1. The wound. Ulliger pricked the bladder with a porcupine quill. Water dripped onto the magnetite sand below, each drop making the grains jump like startled reindeer. So fell the chariot's blood, not down to earth, but across the shoulders of the north wind. Step 2. The scattering. The granddaughter fanned the oil lamp's flame, sending shadows dancing across the chum's hides. Where light touched certain patches of treated leather, hidden constellations glowed faintly, painted there long ago with luminous lichen paste. Step 3. The capture. Now came the rabbit fur, rubbed briskly against a piece of amber. When held near the magnetite, the grains suddenly leapt upward, forming shimmering arcs in mid-air. The sky spirits gathered the fallen light, Ulliger whispered as the phenomenon unfolded, but couldn't put it back together, so they stretched it like sinew across the night. Outside, the real aurora began its proper dance. The timing was no accident. The elders knew the solar wind schedule better than the shamans knew their own heartbeat. Inside, children watched the demonstration with solemn understanding. The green glow matched the oxidized copper amulets their mothers wore. The flickering patterns mirrored their own breath on cold mornings. The silence held the same weight as when stepping on untested ice. Ulliger concluded by sprinkling the magnetite sand into the fire, where it sparked blue, just like the legendary cold flame seen during particularly violent auroral displays. The children's last sight before sleep was the water bladder, still dripping slowly, its surface now reflecting the undulating lights outside. The temperature had plunged to -60 degrees Celsius, the perfect conditions for ice harvesting. Before dawn, The Evenki women wrapped their faces in caribou fur masks with narrow eye slits, their breath forming instant frost on the hairs. They carried bone adzes with walrus ivory blades, braided kelp ropes soaked in seal oil for flexibility, mammoth rib sleds lined with sphagnum moss. At the sacred ice lake, known as Mirror That Never Melts, the ritual began with 3 circles walked counterclockwise to honor the water spirit. Then the precise labor commenced. Phase 1. Marking. Using urine, the only liquid that wouldn't freeze instantly, they drew a grid on the ice surface. The yellow lines vanished within minutes, but not before the eldest woman had identified bubble-free sections for clarity, marked stress points with charred stick nicks, designated harvest order based on ice song, listening through a hollowed antler. Phase 2. Extraction. The adze work required perfect coordination. First strike, a glancing blow at 45 degrees to fracture surface tension. Second strike, direct hit following the crystal grain. Third strike, sideways tap to separate block. The ice sang differently depending on its age and purity. Experienced harvesters could identify calf ice, 1 winter old, high-pitched ping, bull ice, 3 winters, deep resonant tone, spirit ice, clear blue sections, no sound at all. Phase 3. Storage. Each 30-kilogram block was wrapped in reindeer felt, loaded onto sleds using walrus hide nets, buried in underground caches lined with ptarmigan feathers. As they worked, the women explained the ice's purpose. Medicine ice, from the lake center, would treat summer fevers. Story ice, with trapped air bubbles, would preserve oral histories. Moon ice, harvested at twilight, would be sculpted into ceremonial objects. At midday, they rested inside an ice dome constructed from offcuts, drinking tea warmed in a sealskin pouch against someone's bare stomach. The youngest apprentice was allowed to lick an ice shard, her tongue sticking momentarily in initiation as the elder described how the fox's broken chariot had first fallen on this very lake. The darkest night had come. Outside the ceremonial chum, 7 ice pillars stood in the Ursa Major formation, their cores hollowed to hold blubber lamps that cast wavering constellations across the snow. Inside, the preparations had taken 6 uninterrupted days. 1. The costuming 3 elder women worked without sleep to prepare the sacred garments. A reindeer hide cloak embroidered with 347 tin beads, representing the days between solstices. Antler headdresses wrapped in strips of dried seal intestine that glowed translucent when heated from within. Mittens woven from Arctic bumblebee cocoons, the only insect material warm enough for this night, too. The feast on raised ice platforms to prevent thawing. Frozen char tongues arranged in spiral patterns. Cloudberry preserves sealed in bear bladders. Shaved mammoth tusk, harvested from permafrost, dissolved in hot water as ceremonial tea. 3. The reindeer effigy, life-sized and articulated, constructed from ribs, driftwood lashed with whale tendon, hide, pieced together from summer moltings, eyes, polished hematite stones that reflected firelight like living orbs. As the last sliver of sun vanished, observed through an ice lens focused on the horizon, the lead shaman began the dance of the silver reindeer, a slow, shuffling progress around the central fire that mimicked the first 3 steps, the chariot's initial fracture, the 7 staggers, the reindeer's panicked flight, the 12 small jumps, the moment the largest ice piece became our moon. Children participated by tending gut-skin balloons filled with hydrogen from iron-rich springs, released to simulate escaping chariot fire. Playing fox-bone flutes whose pentatonic scales mirrored ice vibration frequencies, distributing lichen wafers stamped with celestial patterns. At the ceremony's peak, when the real aurora flared particularly bright, the effigy was dismantled piece by piece and fed to the fire. The hematite eyes were retrieved unharmed from the ashes, proof the spirit had departed safely. As dawn's first glow appeared, magnified and tinted blue by the ice pillars, the exhausted participants slept where they collapsed, knowing the sun's return was secured for another year. Only the fox-bone flutes remained active, their air holes slowly freezing shut in the returning cold. The time had come to harvest the message ice, those special blue-veined blocks containing winter's wisdom. The village's memory keeper, a position passed down matrilineally for 12 generations, led the procession to the ice caves, wearing her ceremonial regalia, a necklace of 30 carved ivory beads, each representing a year of preserved messages, fox fur mittens with the palms removed, allowing direct skin contact with the ice, a belt of braided reindeer sinew threaded with wolf teeth for spiritual protection. The extraction ritual required perfect silence for 17 minutes, the time it takes for breath to freeze completely on still air. With practiced movements, the memory keeper, 1, located the target block, running bare fingertips along the ice wall until finding the section that didn't stick to skin, minus 25 degrees Celsius ideal temperature, emitted faint ultrasonic vibrations, detectable by cheekbone resonance, showed the clearest tree rings of seasonal freezing 2, activated the message using tools passed down since the Great Chariot Fall, a copper tongue for licking specific ice crystal patterns, a mammoth tusk stylus to trace hidden grooves, a sealskin bladder of warm water applied in precise droplets. As the ice yielded its secrets, apprentices documented the revelations through the first layer, weather records. Bubbles arranged in distinct clusters equals snowfall patterns. Vertical hairline fractures, unseasonal warm spells. Embedded pollen grains, ancient wind directions. The second layer, hunting knowledge. Shadow images of migrating herds captured during spring thaws. Salinity gradients marking prime fishing locations, microscopic blood traces from wounded prey. The third layer, celestial alignments. Captured starlight refractions predicting auroral activity. Lunar eclipse sequences frozen mid-event. The legendary dark pattern foretelling volcanic winters. When the final message had been transferred to fresh ice blocks using a specialized snow alchemy process involving crushed emerald and ptarmigan bile, the memory keeper performed the sealing ritual, breathing 3 measured breaths onto each new block, pressing a child's handprint into the surface, singing the containment song at 128 hertz, the resonant frequency of pure ice. As they departed, leaving the cave's natural freezer to preserve the knowledge, the youngest apprentice was given a sliver of laughter ice, a rare formation containing air bubbles from ancestral celebrations. When placed on her tongue, it released not just the sound, but the warmth of those long-ago moments. The time of the blue twilight had arrived, that singular week when the Arctic sun barely grazed the horizon before retreating, staining the snow with violet shadows. This was when the Evenki performed the Kigil ceremony, the fox's chance to atone for breaking the moon chariot. The preparations began at the breath-freezing hour, when exhaled vapor turns to ice crystals mid-air. The shaman's apprentices gathered the sacred materials, Arctic fox pelt, from a natural death, with the winter-white fur still holding traces of golden guard hare's chariot ice, harvested from the deepest glacier layer containing trapped air bubbles over 10,000 winters old aurora thread, lichen-dyed sinew exposed to exactly 17 minutes of northern lights. The ritual space was prepared in concentric circles. Outer ring, 99 ice candles, seal oil with wicks of dried moss. Middle ring, antler fragments arranged in the broken chariot pattern. Inner circle, a bed of crushed amethyst to refract moonlight. Phase 1, the accusation. The eldest storyteller, wrapped in a cloak of woven owl feathers, began recounting the fox's crime. As she spoke, assistants rubbed fox bones together to produce a remorseful chattering sound, projected distorted shadows using ice lenses to recreate the chariot's fracture, released pockets of hydrogen gas that ignited in colored flames, blue for regret, white for forgiveness. Phase 2. The defense. A young girl representing the fox spirit wore a mask carved from lightweight mammoth tusk, mittens lined with stolen moonlight, quartz crystals ground to optical purity, a belt of living snow bunting feathers. Her dance mimicked the fox's hunger that drove the theft, his panic as the chariot shattered, the centuries spent gathering lost light in his winter coat. Phase 3, the restoration at dawn's first light, amplified through an ice prism. Participants sewed the aurora thread through the fox pelt in healing patterns, pressed the chariot ice against it, creating temporary fusion, chanted at 4-3-2. Hertz, the frequency that makes ice crystals form perfect hexagons. The miracle occurred just as the sun fully rose. The pelt absorbed the ice's ancient light. The golden guard hairs began glowing faintly blue. The assembled antler fragments levitated momentarily. When the ceremony ended, the transformed pelt was placed in the night tent, a special dwelling where children whisper their dreams to the fur. The sick receive its cool radiance. Hunters consult its glow before tracking. The fox had not been forgiven, but his debt was now measured in shared light rather than broken ice. As the villagers dispersed to their chums, the first snow buntings of spring appeared, their bellies faintly luminous where they'd brushed against the sacred pelt. The spring thaw had revealed something extraordinary, a patch of bubbling mud where the permafrost was exhaling ancient secrets. The Evenki gathered at this living wound in the earth, their ceremonial garb specially prepared for confronting deep time, faces smeared with iron oxide paste to resist the old air sickness, boots lined with layers of dried sphagnum moss for insulation against chronological shock, necklaces strung with mammoth molars ground into prismatic lenses. The head exhumer, a woman whose lineage specialized in deep conversations, began by planting 9 time staffs around the site. Hollow bones filled with granules of volcanic ash for dating. Mercury droplets to detect spiritual disturbances. Shredded birch bark prayers as diplomatic offerings. Phase 1. The unbinding. Using tools never employed for living creatures, a narwhal tusk probe to measure the depth of memory, golden eagle talons mounted on driftwood handles for precise excavation, woven horsehair nets to catch escaping gases. The first artifact emerged wreathed in methane ghosts, a perfectly preserved mammoth tongue, its taste buds still visible. The exhumer placed it on a frame of antlers where it curled slightly in the sunlight, as if trying to speak, exuded droplets of Pleistocene water when stroked with feather dusters, projected shadow patterns matching constellations from 23,000 winters, past Phase 2. The transcription specialists employed extraordinary methods to interpret findings. Ice Age ink, ground azurite mixed with melted glacier water for recording memory skins, prepared calf hides tanned with Arctic willow bark, time knots, complex string configurations encoding decay rates. Children participated by brushing the artifacts with Arctic hair tails to remove temporal static, holding copper mirrors to redirect stale sunlight from the Pleistocene tasting extracted ice cores to identify ancient seasons by mineral profile. Phase 3, the rebinding. As the active excavation concluded, the team returned 83% of specimens to the permafrost in specially prepared birch bark coffins, deposited contemporary artifacts for future civilizations, including a USB drive sealed in mammoth fat, sang the mammoth lullaby in reverse to re-establish geological sleep. The remaining artifacts were prepared for community study. A woolly rhino horn that hummed when stroked grass bundles still retaining their Ice Age chlorophyll. Microscopic air bubbles containing 0.0002% mammoth breath. That evening, the exhumer's daughter slept with the smallest artifact, a frozen mammoth eyelash sealed in amber. She dreamed of steam rising from glacial rivers, and when she awoke, her pillow held a perfect ice crystal, shaped like the lost chariot's wheel. The summer solstice had painted the sky in perpetual twilight, that magical time when Evenki herders performed the Utagai ceremony to bind their reindeer to the cosmos. The chosen breeding stock, 3 females with coats that shimmered like comet dust, and 1 celestial marked male, stood tethered to meteorite fragments sunk deep in the tundra. Pre-dawn preparations. The herder shamans worked with ritual precision, coat brushing, using combs carved from driftwood soaked in starlight, exposed on winter ice for 3 months, fossilized mammoth ivory containing trapped cosmic rays, caribou antler tips naturally charged with geomagnetic energy. Antler wrapping, applying sacred bindings made from braided strands of the northern lights, silk dyed with lichen and crushed lapis lazuli, tendons from the legendary white reindeer of Yamal Thin, strips of birch bark inscribed with star maps, hoof painting mark each hoof with the Big Dipper, front right, Orion's belt, front left, Polaris, rear right, the Milky Way, rear left, the celestial alignment. As the sun kissed the horizon at midnight, the herders positioned polished obsidian mirrors to create a star path across the tundra, released specially trained snow buntings carrying threads of glowing fox fur, played the star lure, a flute carved from a meteorite-struck larch tree. The reindeer began their ceremonial dance, their movements mirroring the swaying gait of Ursa Major circling Polaris, the sudden leaps of shooting stars, the slow procession of planets along the ecliptic, the union moment, when the male mounted the led female, the herders, through powdered moon rock, actually fulgurite from lightning strikes, into the air, sounded drums stretched with skin from the last Ice Age reindeer, chanted at the exact frequency that makes quartz crystals vibrate, 32,768 hertz. The next morning, the herd bore subtle changes. Their eyes reflected starlight even at noon. Their coats grew patterns resembling ancient constellations. Their milk contained traces of iridium normally found in asteroids. The pregnant females were taken to the Star Meadow, a valley where magnetic anomalies created floating ice crystals. The grass grew in perfect Fibonacci spirals. Time moved 0.3% slower than elsewhere. Here they would graze until winter, their unborn calves already singing the songs of distant galaxies. On the winter solstice, when the Arctic night stretched its longest, the Evenki gathered at the Ice Mirror Lake to witness the culmination of their year-long rituals. The air hummed with a peculiar stillness, the kind that precedes celestial events. Preparations had been underway since the last aurora. The sacred construct at Lake Center stood the rebuilt moon chariot, crafted from frame, whale ribs lashed with braided midnight, horsehair soaked in squid ink, runners, polished meteorite slabs channeled with star paths, body, 10,000 ice shards collected from glaciers, each containing a trapped air bubble from the original chariot's fall, a fleck of fox fur, a mineral signature from one of the 5 lost fragments, the living components, 7 silver reindeer, descendants of the star-bound herd, stood harnessed with halters woven from northern lights, filaments, antler caps of frozen mercury, hoof bells cast from the same alloy as the Voynich manuscript's ink. The ceremony unfolds. As the final star aligned, observed through a 7-layered ice lens, the shaman lit the time candle, Arctic wolf tallow mixed with volcanic ash, burned blue at both ends, produced no heat, cast shadows, showing events 12,000 years apart, initiated the chant cycle, 7 elders singing at 7 different frequencies, children echoing in reverse pitch, dogs howling at precise harmonic intervals, released the fox's spirit. The transformed pelt from Part 7 was placed aboard the chariot, its glow intensifying as it absorbed candle shadows, activated the ice shard memories, began pulsing in time with the real moon's hidden heartbeat. The moment of alignment, when the candle burned exactly halfway, measured by a water clock carved from a single sapphire, the impossible occurred. The lake ice became perfectly transparent. The chariot's reflection merged with the actual moon. Every participant's shadow briefly showed their ancestral form. Then, silence. The chariot remained on the ice, but something had changed. The runners now bore microscopic grooves matching lunar craters. The reindeer's eyes held tiny novas in her pupils. The fox pelt had become pure light, yet retained its weight. As dawn's first light touched the horizon, the elders smiled. They needed no instruments to confirm what their bones knew. The moon's phases would now wax and wane differently, the lost piece finally restored. The proof that night, when the moon rose, its craters formed a new pattern, the outline of a running fox. Ice crystals throughout the region spontaneously aligned to its light. Every Evenki child under 7 reported the same dream. A silver chariot riding the solar winds, its passenger a glowing fox cub holding the missing fragment like a gift. The stories never leave. They only rest a while, curled like foxes in the spaces between, starlight and snow breath and silence, memory and the next teller's lips. When you hear the ice sing on a cold night, that's the chariot's runners still humming across the sky.